Good afternoon, and thank you for attending or viewing the Office of Public School Construction's presentation on the Full Day Kindergarten Facilities Grant Program. Today, February 25th, 2020, we will provide an overview of the program and program eligibility, go through the application process, and discuss funding order determination and requirements for fund release and program reporting. Today's presentation will be facilitated by the program team members. My name is Joshua Potter. I'm the program supervisor, and I'm also joined here today by one of the program project managers, Lindsay Gordon. A recorded webcast of this presentation will be available on OPSC's website. For program overview, Assembly Bill 1808 established the Full Day Kindergarten Facilities Grant Program, or FDKFGP, and was signed by the governor on June 27, 2018. Senate Bill 75 extended the program on July 1st, 2019. The program provides one-time grants to increase the number of full-day kindergarten classrooms, either by constructing new school facilities or by retrofitting existing school facilities. With the extension of the program, the priority is to fund projects converting from a part-day kindergarten program to a full-day kindergarten program. The program allows, again, for funding for existing kindergartners, not prospective kindergarten pupils, or also known as growth. Please note that transitional kindergartners are included in the enrollment when calculating kindergarten enrollment for the application, and applications will only be accepted during the specified funding rounds. Part of the application submittal and funding rounds. So again, AB 1808 initially appropriated $100 million out of the general fund to the State Allocation Board for this program. The $100 million has been allocated during two funding rounds, which took place in 2019. Senate Bill 75 then appropriated an additional $300 million to extend the program, which will be split into three potential funding rounds. I say potential funding rounds because all funds will be made available in the third funding round, in keeping with the legislative intent to prioritize these conversion projects. Any funds remaining after processing the third round will then be made available in the fourth round. Additionally, if any funding remains at the conclusion of the fourth round, it will then go to the fifth round, and the fifth round will occur. All program funds must be encumbered by the State Allocation Board by June 30th of 2022. As Lindsay will cover later in this presentation, this is part of the reason why our program has a more expedited time frame compared to the school facility program. Since the program is using funding rounds, the date in which the application was received by OPSC will not necessarily determine the funding order, as long as it's received within the funding round. Applications with original signatures and all necessary documents must be physically received by the Office of Public School Construction on or before the last day of the funding round to be considered an application received. Part of the funding, as spelled out in statute, this program uses the most current SFP, or School Facility Program, K-6 New Construction and Modernization Pupil Grant amounts to calculate the amounts of funding for this program for new construction and retrofit grant amounts. The per pupil grant amounts will be adjusted concurrently with the SFP Construction Cost Index adjustments annually. For all applicants, school districts must not have awarded any contracts for the construction of the project for the full day kindergarten program prior to June 27th of 2018. Excluding school districts that receive financial hardship funding, program grants will be provided for projects converting a part day to a full day program, and they will actually have a 75-25 state and local share basis for both new construction and retrofit projects. If we have a fifth round, if there's funding available for that round, for non-conversion projects, the grants will be given on a 50-50 state and local share basis for new construction and a 60-40 basis for retrofit projects. So who can apply? For the 2019 to 2020 and the 2020 to 2021 fiscal years, eligible school districts must meet the following criteria. The application site must not have offered a full-day kindergarten program prior to July 1st of 2019. Again, for these two rounds, they have to be conversion projects. Districts can only use FDKFGP funds to convert part day to a full day. The districts must also currently lack the facilities to adequately provide full-day kindergarten instruction for existing pupils at the project school site. Funding for the third and fourth rounds, again the 2019-2020 or the 2020 and 2021 fiscal years, will be limited again just to those converting project school sites. Continuing who can apply. In order to be eligible to apply, the school districts must meet the following requirements. The district currently has or will have a projected completion, a school board resolution providing the approval to provide that full-day kindergarten instruction at the project school site, and we will cover a little bit more of that later. The district must also currently lack the facilities to adequately provide full-day instruction for the existing pupils on that project site. Again, if funds are available for that fifth round, it would be open then to districts also who had a program already but still lacked the facilities to provide the full-day kindergarten instruction. So how do we determine if they're lacking facilities? Classroom capacity. For a district will be considered lacking full-day kindergarten facilities if the site's current enrollment exceeds the existing kindergarten compliant classroom capacity prior to the construction of the project. Compliant classroom refers to the classrooms that met Title V requirements at the time of construction. Classrooms constructed as kindergarten classrooms or altered to house kindergarten pupils, regardless of current use, will be included when determining the existing kindergarten classroom capacity. The SFP loading standard of 25 K6 pupils will be applied to each classroom within the project. Even if there are less than 25 pupils loading the projected classrooms, which again we'll go into more detail a little bit later. For example, if a school has 40 kindergarten pupils that are not housed in kindergarten facilities, they are eligible for 2 classrooms because they would still need to go at that loading standard of 25. In other words, grants are based on increments of 25 pupils. Continuing on who can apply, statute only allows school districts to apply for funding. Therefore, COEs, charter schools, JPAs or Joint Powers Authority, and the State Department of Education are ineligible to apply. However, school districts that provide kindergarten instruction may apply on behalf of a charter school that is located in district-owned facilities. School districts must hold title to the real property where the facilities will be located. Therefore, projects located on leased lands are not eligible to apply through this program. This is an example of a full-day kindergarten project. Before the project, or over on the left-hand side, the school site had 2 part-day kindergarten classrooms with 50 pupils in each, 25 in the morning, 25 in the afternoon. In order to provide full-day kindergarten instruction for all pupils, the school district would need two new kindergarten classrooms. The need for the 2 classrooms translates to, again, being eligible for the 50 pupil grants. After the project, the school would end up with 4 total full-day kindergarten classrooms with 25 pupils in each, which again would be the demonstration on the right-hand side. Types of grants. The program has 2 main grants offered, which are the new construction and retrofit. New construction grants seek to increase the number of full-day kindergarten classrooms by the addition of classrooms to an existing school site. Retrofit grants seek to increase the number of full-day kindergarten classrooms by retrofitting an existing facility that is not a kindergarten classroom. For both types of grants, the districts will need to certify if there are any classrooms on the site that met kindergarten design requirements when they were built or were later retrofitted to do so. Part of the verification process will include consulting with the California Department of Education, or CDE, to determine if an application should be limited to a retrofit project. Consultation with CDE will be conducted on a project-by-project basis. OPSC will use the enrollment data and the site maps to verify a school's overall need for FDKFGP funding based off of enrollment patterns and capacity at the site. For both types of grants, districts must certify if there are any classrooms on the site that met the design requirements when they were built, or again, if they were retrofitted thereafter. A full-day kindergarten facilities grant program does not allow for the construction of new portable classrooms. It does allow for the retrofitting of existing portable facilities. Retrofit funding, additionally, is not inclusive of demolition of an entire facility. Continuing on the types of grants, there are 2 different types. Again, here we have grants without advance funds and grants with advance funds. So new construction or retrofit grant requests without an advance release of funds are for districts that have all of the required supporting documentation, including the Division of the State Architect, or DSA, plan approval, as well as the CDE final plan approval. New construction or retrofit grant requests with an advance release of funds are for districts that have none or only a portion of the required supporting documentation. Districts doing new construction projects can request an advance funding for design costs and/or site acquisition costs. Advance fund release for design costs for new construction would be 40% of the base grant. Districts doing retrofit projects can request the advance release of funding for design costs, and that would be 25% of the retrofit base grant. Base grants for both new construction and retrofit projects can be increased by additional grants. For new construction projects, districts may also request additional funding for site acquisition costs. The site must be adjacent to the existing facility or site, and funding will be provided respective to the land required for the proposed project. Also, hazardous waste removal, automatic fire detection alarm systems, automatic sprinkler systems. Keep in mind for these, the work for all the supplemental grants must have been completed during the course of the project in order to get that grant. Site development, new construction base grant will be increased by 35%. This number was determined by looking at historical averages of SFP projects for site development grants to determine this percentage. Multi-level classroom construction, the new construction base grant will be increased by 12%, similar to SFP. Also, project assistance, this grant is for school districts that have a district enrollment of 2,500 or less. For retrofit projects, districts may also get additional funding for automatic fire detection and alarm systems. Site development, which is different from SFP, site development is allowed in full-day kindergarten facilities grant program, and again will be 35% of the retrofit base grant. The utility costs for the retrofit of 50 years or older permanent buildings, the retrofit base grant for these would be increased by 15%. And this number again was determined by looking at the historical average of SFP projects for the 50-year-old utilities grant and project assistance. Again, site development grants are available for both new construction and retrofit. They are designed and intended for the required additional features such as playgrounds, added restrooms, parking lots, drop-off and pickup locations, and such. And I will turn it over to Lindsay for the application process.
Thank you. So I'll go over the application process along with the form and move on from there. So what makes a complete application? All school districts requesting FDK funding must submit all of the following. So an application for funding, which is the Form 7001, a site map, and within that site map, districts must identify and label all the use of all the facilities at the site, identify and label all kindergarten classrooms that were kindergarten classrooms when they were constructed, identify any kindergarten classrooms that will not provide full-day kindergarten at the completion of the project. And then documentation verifying district's overall enrollment at the site. Documentation enrollment may be provided by using CBEDs, registration documents for the school site, such as CalPADs, things like that. Districts must use the most current enrollment data at the time of the application submittal, as well as the 3 immediately preceding years. A school board resolution approving the full-day kindergarten instruction to be provided at the site may be provided with the original submission of the 7001 or with the 7003, which is the expenditure report at the completion of the project. So continuing with a complete application, a narrative must also be submitted of the proposed project, and within this narrative, an explanation of the district's scope of work in the project, how many classrooms were kindergarten compliant at the time of construction, explain where kindergartners are currently being housed at the site, and then explain the district's planned kindergarten classroom usage at the completion of the site. Districts may still offer part-day kindergarten if they choose, but just know that those part-day classrooms would not be eligible for funding. A clear description in the narrative of the current kindergarten program at the site, specifically if the site is currently offering a full-day program, and if so, when did it begin? And if not, it must be offered by the completion of the project. So districts applying for a new construction grant without an advance release of funds must submit with their 7001 a DSA application number, DSA final plan approval letter, CDE final plan approval letter, and then plans and specifications for the DSA approved project, which can be submitted on a CD-ROM or a flash drive. And then CDE final site approval letter, which will be for those districts that are requesting site acquisition. Appraisal of the property for site acquisition must be dated within 6 months prior to the purchase of the site. So districts applying for new construction grant with an advance release of funds for design and or site must submit with the following. So if they are applying for an advance with site, then a CDE contingent site approval letter, and then again, the preliminary appraisal of that property must be dated within 6 months prior to the receival of the 7001. And then districts applying for retrofit grant without an advance release of funds must submit the following. It's very similar to the new construction. DSA application number, DSA approval letter date, CDE approval letter date, plans and specifications, and then on the site map must identify facilities to be retrofitted in the FDK program and the age of those buildings on the site map if the district is requesting the 50-year utilities grant. So the effective date for determining the age of a building is 1 year from the DSA approval date. So now we'll go through completing the funding application. So we'll fill out the form and then a quick overview of the financial hardship process. So all information on the 7001 requested in the header must be provided. The district must assign a project tracking number or a PTN to this project. The same PTN is used by OPSC, CDE, and DSA for all project applications submitted to those agencies. And we all use it to track the project throughout the process. If the district has already assigned a PTN to the project for CDE approval or DSA approval, you're going to want to use the same PTN number for the FDK project. If no PTN has been assigned for this project, a PTN may be obtained from OPSC's website. We'll have a link at the end. So when making a PTN, you're going to select the SFP option because there isn't a full day kindergarten option. And in the notes section, please include that this is an FDK project. If it is a hybrid project or combined set with an SFP project, make sure and explain that. And then the number of FDK classrooms that are delineated by the scope. So for section 1 of the 7001, it's the type of application. So check the appropriate box that indicates the program funding the district is requesting. And for the purposes of new construction apportionment with or without an advance release of funds, check those boxes that are appropriate. And we have added a checkbox for projects that include both new construction and retrofit scopes of work. Section 2 is the pupil grant request and project information. Enter the total number of pupils assigned to the project using the state loading standard of 25 pupils. Enter the number of new construction or new kindergarten classrooms for which the district is requesting funding for. And then you're going to enter DSA's application number for this project, and that's only if it's applicable, so without advance. Enter the dates of CDE's final plan approval, and enter the dates of CDE's final plan approval. Within that CDE letter, you would have the recommended site size, existing usable acres, and proposed usable acres that you would input here as well. And then if the district is requesting site acquisition, enter the dates of the CDE site approval letter or the CDE contingent site approval letter. Okay, so for section 3 in the 7001, enter the project priority funding order for that application. Is in relation to other FDK applications that were submitted in that same round. This is where the district has the opportunity to prioritize their projects if multiple applications were submitted. And this may come into play if the program is oversubscribed. So for preference points will be used to determine the order in which districts are funded. Districts with the highest preference points will receive priority funding. So check the box if the district is requesting financial hardship and or is requesting to receive the preference points for financial hardship because it is unable to meet a portion of or all of its matching share requirement. To receive preference points for financial hardship, a district must meet the criteria defined in Education Code, and projects that do meet these criteria will receive 40 preference points. And then enter in the district's free and reduced price meals, or the FRPM, or low income percentage, if the district is requesting to receive priority for having a high population of FRPM eligible pupils. And because a high percentage is required, districts must have at least 60% to receive preference points. And the district can earn up to 40 points based on a sliding scale. Okay. So with the financial hardship process, this is just a quick review. Districts submits funding application and checks the box for financial hardship on the Form 7001. OPSC will notify the district that the 7001 is being processed. And then the district will be contacted by the financial hardship team. From that contact date by the financial hardship team, the district will have 30 days to submit its documents. Financial hardship is approval and funding applications will be processed concurrently. And then something to note, the district does not have to have an approved financial hardship review prior to submitting an application. During the filing round period, when an application is received requesting financial hardship, the FDK team will notify our financial hardship team and they will begin that process. And if you want any more specific information on financial hardship, we've included a contact at the end of this PowerPoint where you can get your questions answered. So Section 5 of the 7001, we have the new construction additional grant request for supplemental grants. You're going to want to check the appropriate boxes for funding, fire detection and sprinkler system, site development costs, multi-level construction. This is where you list the number of kindergarten classrooms within the multi-level facility as identified in your plans and specifications. And then project assistance. Section 6 is the new construction additional grant for site acquisition. If the district is requesting funding for eligible site acquisition costs, enter the following information. Enter 50% of the actual cost, and then enter 50% of the appraised value of the site. If the request is made, enter 50% of the preliminary appraised value. Appraisals must be dated within 6 months prior to the receivable date. And note that the site acquisition grant will be lesser of 1/2 of the actual cost of the site or 1/2 of the appraised value of the site. Enter 2% of the lesser of the actual cost or appraised value of the site, which is a minimum of $25,000. And then enter 50% of the actual relocation cost. For advance only, you would fill out number 5, which is enter 50% of the estimated relocation costs. And number 6, enter 50% of the Department of Toxic Substances Control, DTSC, and their fee for review and approval of the Phase 1 environmental site assessment and preliminary endangerment assessment reports. And then again, number 7 is for advance only, which is enter 15% of the appraised value for DTSC fees. So continuing with Section 6, you enter 50% of the actual amount allowable for hazardous materials, waste removal, or remediation for the site, and enter 50% of the estimated hazardous waste removal. And that's advance only. And if it is an RA, check that box. For Section 7 is retrofit additional grant, which is automatic fire detection, site development, 50-year-old utilities for those buildings over 50 years, and project assistance. So check any of those boxes that would apply, and those do have to be in your plans. So for construction information on Section 8, check the box that best represents the delivery method that the district will use or has used for the project. If it's not known, then leave it blank. And then in B, you would enter in the construction contracts that were awarded for this project and when. And if they have not been executed, you would just put NA. And if this is not enough space for construction contract dates, it can just be attached on a separate sheet. So for sections 9 and 10, an architect of record or a licensed architect must fill these sections out. And to note that if you are applying for a grant with an advance, then you would only fill out these sections if you do have those DSA plans and you have a or a licensed architect or design professional. If not, then you would just leave these sections blank. So for section 11, it's our certifications page. There are a few new certifications that we want to make sure and point out to you. So on the third bullet, it requires the district representative to insert the date of the school board resolution needed to apply for the program funds. This certification is to state the number of classrooms at the school site that were built or previously altered to meet the requirements for a kindergarten classroom. Also, districts should label these on their site map. And a new certification that we have added to the 7001, the district must certify whether they are currently offering full-day kindergarten or that they are not offering kindergarten. So in one of the last couple of certifications, at this certification, this shows the district has an option to either submit their full-day kindergarten resolution along with the application, or that they will provide it at the completion of the project. And please note that any revisions to the 7001 must have that are completed must be re-signed and dated by both the district representative and, if it applies, the architect of record. So now we'll go through that funding order. So with preference points, they'll be used to determine the order in which districts are funded. Preference points will be given to each approved application with up to 80 points. 40 points will be given to those districts that meet the requirements for financial hardship. And program statute states that preference is given to school districts that cannot provide a portion or all of the local matching share. Therefore, a school district that is able to provide the required matching share would not qualify for financial hardship. Up to 40 points will be given based on the district percentage of pupils who are eligible for the free and reduced price meals. And this percentage will be based on district data, not site-specific data. And you can find that scale, the sliding scale, in our regulations. So continuing with our funding order, there is a possibility of multiple waves of the funding order with each funding round based on the number of applications each school district submits, and all approved projects will be funded in order determined by the preference points until all funds are exhausted. So the first wave of the funding order would be decided as follows. School districts will be funded based on the total preference points. If a school district submits multiple applications in the same funding round, OPSC will use the priority number assigned to each application by the school districts on Section 3 of that 7001. School districts will have their first priority projects funded in order based on preference points until all school districts have had their first priority project funded. So school districts with the same total preference points will be funded based on their FRPM percentage, which is reported to 1 decimal place. And those with a higher FRPM will be funded first. So this is newer from the last 2 rounds. And we'll go into more detail with some examples later. If school districts are still tied in preference points and FRPM percentage to 1 decimal point, the districts will then be placed into a lottery system. So if sufficient funding remains after the process we just described, a second wave of funding will be decided as follows. School districts with the highest total preference points shall have their remaining projects funded by their priority number, and funding shall then be provided to the next school district with the next highest preference points. Again, a tiebreaker will be used for districts with the same low income percentage as reported to 1 decimal place. And then if using the low income percentage to one decimal place and districts are still tied, then districts will be placed into a lottery to determine who's funded first. So when it comes to partial funding, if the board does not have sufficient funding to fully apportion a district's project, then that district may elect to accept partial funding. And if they do accept partial funding, it would be considered full and final. And if they choose to decline it, then the board may offer the funding to the next approved application based on that point order. If the district declines, they may reapply to a following round if that does apply. Okay, so here's a funding order example that will kind of explain it a little easier. So the following 5 school districts have applied to the program and all applications were approved for funding. School districts B, C, and D all have 70 preference points, and District B has an FRPM of 90.4%, where District C and D have a tied FRPM of 90.3%. So District C and D are placed into a lottery to determine the funding order and the funding wave that will fund each of these 2 school districts. So in this example, School District B would be funded first through the lottery, would be funded first because their FRPM is higher. And then School District C and D will be placed into a lottery. And for this example, District C came out of the lottery first, District D came out second. So this same order will apply to the subsequent funding waves. So School District A has a total of 75 preference points and was not placed into a lottery since no other districts were tied for preference points. Districts B, C, and D had 70 preference points but have a different numbering of applications. And then School District E is the final district with 68 preference points but does not participate in the lottery because no other district was tied for points. So with the first wave of funding, Districts A through E will have their first priority project funded. Assuming that there is sufficient funding for all approved projects, the funding will continue. So School District A will have its remaining 2 projects funded. Districts B and C and D will have their second priority project funded, and then this would complete the funding for all of District C's projects since they just had the 2. Now we move on to fund the third priority projects for Districts B and D, and then School District D's 4th priority project since District B only had the 3 projects. And then finally we fund District E's remaining projects. So this is just a small example of how it could work. We didn't have any of that in the first 2 rounds due to the number of applications we had. So fund release and reporting. For the fund release process, school districts who receive new construction or retrofit grants without an advance release of funds must submit a valid fund release authorization form, which is Form 7002, with all required approvals within 180 days of the apportionment. And then school districts who receive new construction or retrofit grants with an advance release of funds must then submit a valid 7002 with all of the required approvals within 12 months of apportionment. You don't need to submit a 7002 for the release of advance funds, only for full fund release. So because the program is funded from money from the general fund, school districts do not have to participate in the priority and funding process in order to access the program funds. So a grant agreement must be submitted prior to the release of any funds, and all apportionments will result in cash proceeds being available, and grant agreements must be executed by that authorized district representative. If a 7002 is not received within 180 days or 12 months of the apportionment will be rescinded. So a sample of a program timeline for projects that were funded without advance. School districts will come in with their 7001. OPSC approves the application and the SAB approves the apportionment. OPSC will create and provide a corresponding grant agreement to be executed and returned concurrently with or prior to submitting a 7002. School districts will then have to submit a valid 7002, and once those have been submitted and approved by OPSC, all funds will be released to the school district. So as a reminder, school districts have 180 days to complete this process. So a program timeline for districts with advance. After the funding is, after the application is received and approved by OPSC, then the application will go to SAB and receive approval for apportionment. If the district is requesting an advance for the design of the project and or site, then they will receive the advance funds for OPSC once OPSC receives a valid grant agreement. So a 7002 is not required for this. Once the school district is ready for the fund release, they must submit a valid 7002 and a grant agreement, and their funds will be released. The district may submit a 7002 in phases for the release of the remaining funds if they have asked for advance on site acquisition and design. And then once that is done, they can request the release of full funding. And then again, districts have 1 year from SAB apportionment to request the fund release. And then program reporting. A school district that receives FDK funding must submit a valid expenditure report, which is the Form 7003, at the completion of the project. Projects will be deemed complete either when the notice of completion for the project has been filed or 1 year from the final fund release date. 2 7003 forms will be submitted for a district that has project savings. The first one, the final expenditure report, will be submitted 1 year from the project completion or the final fund release date. And the second, the final savings report, will be submitted 1 year after the submittal of the expenditure report. Projects will be subject to a local audit to assure that expenditures incurred by the district were made in accordance with education code and program requirements. Okay, so here's a link for the FDK website where it has information for all of our forms, along with where this webcast will be posted, and then the PTN generator and project tracker link as well. Okay, we have our contact here information. It's also on the webpage. Any questions you may have, feel free to contact us at any time. And then OPSC Contacts. So John Lininger for your financial hardship questions, and Jason Hernandez if you have any questions on audits. We also have available our address for when 7001s are submitted. And that's it. Any questions? Yeah. Yes. Can you help? No? Here you go.
So it's...
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sumit Goyal with CFW. It's our understanding that the Form 7001 has been amended since the last application round. Has that form been finalized and has that been published?
Yes. It's currently on the website, on the FDK page. You can see it if you scroll down to the bottom. There's links for all 3 forms that have been updated and approved. Any other questions I can answer?
Yeah, good afternoon. Tim Sisson with Train. I'm wondering, is there any portion of this that would be very similar to the high performance incentive grant that was embedded in Prop 1D to promote maybe a healthier classroom?
I'll answer that one. Currently, the program guidelines and eligibility, as well as any of the funding formats, are spelled out in statute, and there was nothing in the statute that abided by the HPI or high performance indicator grants. So it's specifically to the SFP, K6 modernization and new construction grants only, and those supplemental grants that were listed in there as well.
If you want to install green components, you can, but you still get additional funding.
Yes, the other answer was that the work can still move forward in the project, but there would not be additional funding or grants for it. Any other questions? We will still be here for a few minutes if there's any other questions afterwards. Again, I definitely appreciate the attendance and those that are viewing online, those that can view the webcast when it's posted later. As Lindsay showed or explained earlier, if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us on the team. And for those that are in attendance, if you don't mind, before you leave, if you have not already, please go ahead and sign in on the register here so we can see who all attended here. And I appreciate the attention and wish you all a great rest of the day.